Okay. Social class systems through the 1300s to the 1400s. We are group 5. My name is Ashlyn Alcorn.
I'm
Devaney Morales.
I'm Cole Shazinski.
And I'm Guadalupe Capistran.
Starting off with nobility. Nobility in ancient Europe refers to the social elite or the high class. This is going to be the highest social order on the pyramid. It's very typical for this class that you're being born into it. However, there are different types of nobility. The first type is herited nobility. This is when a nobleman is born from a line of other noble parents and noble ancestors. There's noble titles. This refers to nobles who pass down their title by generation. Typically, this refers to roles of the military and those around and under the king, as well as royal decree. This is when a royal allows/grants a noble title to those outside of the direct social elite. And finally, there's nobility for sale. Many nobles at that time would occasionally sell letters of nobility in efforts to fund their wars and also to help with their over-the-top spending habits. However, this is going to be one of the most unpopular ways of gaining nobility, as it did not happen very often and was not accessible to many who did not have the money to buy it. While all of these ranks are noble people and they all fall under the upper class, there are still ranks and hierarchies in this class. They go as followed. Emperor and empress are going to be the ones at the top and who have the most power. Following under them, if there's not an emperor in this village or town, there would be the king and the queen, then the prince and the princess, the duke and the duchess, the marquis and marquise, the count and the countess, the viscount and viscountess, the baron and the baroness, the lord and the lady, and then the knights. Some of the nobility's duties are as follows. The emperor/empress, or if it's a king and a queen, their job is to rule over the land. They maintain laws, collect taxes, meet with members of their kingdom, and make wartime decisions. Occasionally, the king or the emperor would fight alongside his army in battle. However, if that's not the case, he still is the one making the decisions for war. Our prince's duty falls under the king. Usually he is to shadow the king and has less of a responsibility, however, is sitting there throughout the decisions. His biggest role is to serve as one of the heads of the military and have the most power and always fight on the sidelines. The dukes are going to be under all of these as well. Their job is to rule over their own provinces. They are more of a mini king/prince ruling over their own town, however, would come into the big cities, meet with the kings and emperors, and provide their military services as well as their tax money.
So local lords are the lower end of the nobility, whereas they're known as barons, viscounts, lords, counts, that sort of group. And many of these people were given the rights to their land from the nobility, such as dukes, knights, and sometimes kings. But there have also been instances where they've been given their land from members of the church, such as the clergy and abbots. And most of the time, these land rights have been used for their own profit, but have to pay some form of tax, whether it's in military aid by contributing levies, which are conscripted peasants to fight in foreign and domestic wars. And for the local lords that were unable to meet this requirement, they would have to offer some of their revenue or else lose their permission to work the land. Additionally, there were fees where a tenant's daughter had to make their lords to marry their lords knights, and that kind of is part of that aspect of them being in a lower nobility where they were simply servants but also masters to the serfs, which were the servants. Many of these arrangements were known as homage, but that wasn't the only form. But the homage is swearing fealty to their local liege lord, where they acted as vassals, and they did this by receiving the land from their lords, and they would use the land to farm and raise cattle for their liege lord. And oftentimes, this arrangement meant that they would give profit and military aid, as discussed previously. However, the liege not only granted them these lands, but they also offered protection, which in times of war, local lords' lands were often targeted for their food and supply by local bandits and even raiders. And this was most commonly in the Northern Isles of England, where raiders were most prevalent. And the Allied system was an arrangement, besides the homage system, between a lord and a superior lord with inalienable rights to the lands, but the arrangement was not based on the land itself. So enforcing this agreement was often more difficult, and it was often based upon a variety of means, such as marriage and other methods. And many of these vassals' services were made up by the feudal system itself, which perpetuated itself with a status quo. So local lords often funded the equipment that was used in war, and if they weren't able to fund it, they had to send in their own serfs, as the serfs were essentially tied to the land, therefore tied to their owner and used as property.
For knights, they had a lot of different qualities. They were mostly found in parts of Greece, but they were all over the European country. They were known for their faithfulness, skillful with horses, sacrifices, courage, courtesy, and graciousness. The knights were often soldiers first who trained to become knights by their king or their lord. Kings were as young as the knights, were as young as 21 years old, although they would start training as young as 7 years old. Their fighting techniques were so unique that they would often practice so their moves looked authentic, like epic battles. And only those who were wealthy enough got their knights a horse. So this displayed a lot of courage and power for those for the lords who did have the money enough to do this for knights. And they were the most feared and the most protected when fighting. And knights wore armor, who were trained to wear them for protection and also for looks, which were very heavy. So they had to train for them from even when they were 7 years old all the way to when they were 21 years old. For Spartans, they were not like knights. They're different. For their qualities, they had obedience, courage, devotion, excellent military training. For Spartans, they could have fallen into 3 categories during this century. One of them was Spartans who were full citizens. Another one was helots, who were serfs, and another one was perioeci, which means that they would basically make the weapons for the Spartans. So many of the Spartan men became working at the age of 7, which were kind of similar to the knights, as they both started working at a really young age. They had roles of leadership, courage, and strength, which helped determine their ranking. They were extremely skilled at fighting, and male Spartan citizens became soldiers. So this means that they were upper in their rankings. And there were also women Spartans, which means that they had different occupations as the male Spartans, which that means that they were not in the military. So some of their qualities were power, independent-minded, and educated.
So as we have seen in the previous slides, the higher you were on the pyramid, the better treatment and respect you would get. Unfortunately, the serfs were at the very bottom of the pyramid. During those times, they were considered and labeled as slaves and peasants. They had to share their produce with their lord, and they had to do lots of hard farm lots of hard and heavy farm labor. To continue on this topic, serfs were also forced to give their lords respect and honor at all times. Doing this and following these orders were exchanged as them paying back their lord for living on their land and for military protection. If serfs did not want to do this all their lives, they had one way to get out of this, and the only way was paying their lord lots of money for the freedom.
And this is our works cited page. We hope you all learned something, and thank you very much. Okay.